right, gents. Go ahead, DJ. I'm throwing it straight to you because I know you got what you want to say. Go right on ahead, my brother, because right now I actually got my brother Ryan Randolph on the other line. He on the line with me. We talking about 401ks. He just hit me out of nowhere. He was like, "You awake?" I'm like, "Yeah." He over here. He hit me. You know, so we talking 401k talk. We talking money talk at 12:37 a.m. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
So the big thing for me, it was only one of them, but when we started talking about generational cycles and generational curses, look, where I'm from, man, you know, like one of the biggest things that and this is going to be controversial, like, but one of the biggest things that shackles people, I think, is religion. And, you know, I'm a big believer in spirituality, and I'm a big promoter of, you know, hey, you should definitely tap into a higher power or what have you. I never tell anyone what to believe, but I'm steadfast in my beliefs. Steadfast. However, there comes a time when you have to call things what they are. And this is what I've seen. And I didn't see this until I was probably 27, 28 years old. We have a tendency to give the most difficult things to, and I'm using air quotes because, again, we can have people call whomever by different names. We tend to give the most difficult things to God. And we take the easy task for ourselves. And when things become difficult, we decide to do nothing. We throw our hands in the air and we say, you know what? I'm just trusting the Lord for this or whatever. Well, I got news for you. If you open that book that you profess to follow, is going to tell you that faith without works is dead. And so you can sit there wishing all the hell you want to. It ain't happening. It ain't happening. So one of the things that generationally I think has happened, and I mentioned this in the earlier show, is that we get this syndrome, so to speak, that we hope everything is going to work out. That's not how things work. You actually have to put in the effort. You have to put in the work. And when they don't work out, instead of looking at our effort or our planning, our preparation, the execution, the communication, like all the things that matter in bringing something to fruition, we'll simply say, well, I guess it just wasn't my time yet, or we'll say something along the lines of, I guess that wasn't in his plan or what have you. Now, that's not to belittle anyone, but you can't do that when you're not putting forth any effort. Because the same way we talk about favor, preparation and favoring the prepared or whatever, or opportunity favoring the prepared, is no different than, isn't that a blessing? How are we classifying that? Your faith is meeting your work. So I think that we have become crippled, so to speak, as a people, because slave culture is pray and wait, but not pray and do. So you have to do both, in my estimation, my opinion, and whoever takes issue with it can just take issue with it. But you have to do both. You can't pray and just simply wait forever. You have to be taking action as well. There's a point in time where after you've done all you can, then you stand. But that means you still taking action. Yeah. So I'm going to say this and I'll stop. My grandmother, in her infinite wisdom, used to tell me this. She said, son, you can take a shit in one hand and wish in the other. And you let me know which one will get full first. And I had no idea what she was talking about.
Your grandma was real.
Yeah. And because I would always talk about what I wished. Like, I just wish you would not. She said, well, you keep wishing because this is who I am. Or I wish I had. Well, you keep wishing because this is what you got.
The visual.
And Well, you'll figure out really quickly which hand will get full though. So she imparted these things on me that stuck with me, but it was the additional conversation with her that was important. It wasn't that she would just say these off the wall things and not say anything else. She would say that, and she would say, and what I mean by that is this. You can hope for whatever. It's going to be what you're willing to work for, which is going to yield what you're actually going to get. And she talked about creating your own luck. This is a praying woman. And I didn't understand the contradiction during the time, but in actuality, it's really not a contradiction. It's, hey, you know what? I'm going to show reverence to the God that I believe in, but I'm also going to do my part so that when I pray and I ask for things, I put in the work. She was she was and is a big believer in that. But you have so many people that just rest on their laurels and they say, well, I prayed about it, so I'm not going to worry about it. That's the equivalent to just saying, I'm not going to the doctor. Well, if you believe in God, then don't you believe that God helped create doctors and put doctors in place to help you? So if you don't go, it's similar to The Pursuit of Happiness, where Jaden Smith is saying God sent a boat. Said the guy was stuck at sea. We sent a boat. The guy said, no, wait on God to come and get me. And the guy sent another boat. And he was like, hey, no, I'm good. Just waiting on God, and he'll be here soon. And no other boat showed up. He's like, I sent 2 boats. Use your common sense. And so I think that's where we have to get to as it relates to generational wealth, because we identify these curses because, for all intents and purposes, some of us are lazy as hell, and we don't want to do anything to break these cycles. Now, a lot of these things are really real, and they require a lot of work, and they're deep. It's not gonna be a quick fix, is what I'm saying, but the work needs to be done. And if you're willing to do the work, you can break these cycles and you can break through. But you can't rest on your laurels, and you can't do the typical BS and just think that things are going to change. It takes a mind shift, and it takes a willingness to do the work and have the conversations. Very few people are willing to do all three. And that's why we're stuck in what you said last episode, Doc, the development stage. We never get out of it.
Yeah. I think that so when you were talking about sort of slave culture, I have trouble with trying to draw parallels between, especially the slave experience and our experience, and so because I feel like sometimes people try to judge this is part of that whole Kanye thing where he's tried to say that, 400 years sound like a choice. No, it wasn't a choice. There was the entire government was 100% lined up. You can read through the evolution of it and see precisely how black people were treated in this country up until the 70s, and you can look at other court cases and see up through the 2000s and now see how black people have systematically been taken advantage of by this government and by this system. So there's plenty of excuses if you're looking for them, right? Because those all that is flat out true, right? Those are all terrible things, and they're all things that ought to be rectified, but I don't have a lot of confidence that they will be, right? So if you're looking for things to say, well, this is why I'm not going to do it, and this is where we are, then, for us now, we have unprecedented access and entree to places that previous generations didn't have. You look at the race riot, the genocide and property seized that happened in Tulsa back in the 1920s, and you start to see, all right, there were things that happened where the wealth of African American people was systematically destroyed in a way that looks pretty darn intentional, right? And so if you want to have wealth for your next generation and next generation of kids and people, black folks, then we're going to have to be intentional about using all of the products around us to help us get there. Right. And taking advantage of our relative position in history as compared to years and generations past, and use what it is that we can use now. And so that to me, I feel like it's important to put that out there. But the opportunity that we have now is tremendous, right? The opportunities that we have in comparison to the past. I'm not saying it's equal, and I'm not even going to go as far to say that for everybody that's out there it's even fair, right? There's some folks who are born with the worst of hands. And I hope that one day public policy gets to a place where we are more effective at helping those folks and setting a good base of opportunities for people so that they can live with dignity. And if they work hard, they can, have a wage that affords a certain lifestyle to them, and they don't have to worry about everything. But I also I also want to see to the needs of the people who want to push to the next level. I feel like those things are available to all of us. And if you're going to if you're going to have, like we say, securing the bag, having big, audacious goals, right? If you're going to have those big, audacious goals, they don't have to just be goals for you. Now it's goals for the next generation, and how you can set it up in the Bible. What is it, 4 generations or 7 generations that you're supposed to be able to provide for? Those are the blessings that God has out there for us. And so I think, we have a very small view of God. Sometimes, especially when it comes to our finances, and we throw things away in that wish category, like BREADren was talking about. Well, there's nothing that shows that you believe more than acting like it, right? People say they love you, and then they treat you a certain way that indicates that they don't. And you say, wait a minute, your words don't line up with your actions. If you are saying that you believe God, and you have asked for these things, and they in line with His will and all the rest of these things, then you should be acting like it. You should be acting like you think that's the case, which means you do the things to propel you to where it is that you believe through your strong faith that you're going to be able to have for yourself and your generations going forward. So then you start buying the policies. You start investing and accumulating shares in mutual funds and stocks and becoming wealthier over time with the knowledge that that wealth is going to help you do the things that you have planned and prayed for, but actually worked for, moving towards, and now you are examining and measuring your progress towards those things. See, that right there is some works. Right? That right there shows that the faith that you put out there was real. Right? If you throw seed in the ground, it's not just the fact that the seed was planted that is going to affect the crop that you bring in the harvest. Right? A farmer plants a seed in the ground. And we know that eventually something what he planted ought to come up. But he also cultivates the ground. He also irrigates and brings water to the ground. He puts his resources towards that seed with the knowledge that that seed and the system works. So if you believe that, if you believe in God, right, then you should be working towards what it is that you believe in God has in store for you, right? So, even for me, this is the thing. It's just like, all right, well, do I really believe that God has these certain media things out there for me? Well, act like it then, right? Your foot hurt, and I wanted to, part of me, because my foot, I got a high ankle sprain, y'all. I'm getting sympathy from all our listeners now. And so, man, I had no idea how hard this hurt. Me. Man, let me tell you, I was sitting up there. Thanks, DJ. I was sitting up there thinking about like how in my mind I've talking about, oh, it's an ankle sprain, man. You getting millions of dollars. You better hurry up and get out there back on that foot and make that money. Let me tell you something, man. Right now, my foot is beaten. Now, this happened today. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, I got a lot more sympathy for folks with high ankle sprains, man, because if something bad happened tonight and I had to fight somebody, man, I'm gonna be expecting Melissa to do some punching too. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like, I can't do this by myself today. I can't move around that good. So there's a lot happening. I feel like I've lost my point here. My point.
My
point was
if you talking about the works.
Nah, you gotta act like you actually believe, right? That farmer that's planting the seed, that's doing the weeding, that's doing the fertilizer. He's putting resources all into creating the right conditions for that seed that he planted, because he knows that the process works. So it's your job, if you acknowledge that works, then you have to do the same thing. Right? You can't just say, I want to be a neuroscientist and then not work hard on your grades and not apply to colleges and not. If you believe that you're going to be a neuroscientist, then those are things that you know you need to do in order to move to where you gotta have the right conditions. You gotta create the conditions for that seed that you have planted so that it can bloom and grow. And that right there tells me what it is that you believe. Your actions and, your dictated plans that you have out there and how those two things correspond to one another. If you're talking about like what I look at and say, man, this person's got it together, that's it. I'm looking at what it is that you say you want to do and how your actions line up to it.
Hey, I just want to throw this point in there. I don't mean to interrupt, but I like to throw things in the mix and shake it up. Like I said, I've been on the phone with my brother. We talking 401k talk. We talking money talk this time of morning because it's morning time when we record. But I want to throw these two things in there at you too, and I want to see how y'all fight over this. We ain't fighting because we brothers. But I don't think a lot of people know, how easy it is to create generational wealth. And I personally believe that the industry banks on the miseducation and the lack of education of its constituents and consumers. So I'll throw that to you all. And I just want to also throw out to the point that people are listening. 401k money, pre-tax. Guess what happened at tax time? Deduction. Guess what y'all be looking for? Deductions. Go ahead. Talk amongst yourselves.
Man, you can take it if you want it, or I can.
Go ahead, bring it on home, DJ. I've been talking. Go ahead, get it.
So it's not that it's easy, it's that it's easily accessible, and the gap between the understanding of those things is vast because everything comes with an understanding, and I think that's what both myself and Dr. Loving was laying out, because the saying that you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink is really evident here. So let's just start with the 401k. Do you know how many people I have to tell to save the match? The company matches 6%, but they save 2%. I'm like, you got to save 6%. Why would I save 6%? I mean, I need my money. Yo, you're giving away money though. How am I giving away money? The concepts of money is what people don't understand. And see, those are the faculties that we have to correct. It's the concepts of money. It's not the number. It's not the intention. It goes back to what you said earlier, the intention versus the education. The education is not there. Tax deferred income. I'm going to get this money back later. It's going to reduce my tax liability. No one's thinking about that. You know what they're thinking about? My check is going to be $2,666 if I save in my 401k, or it's going to be $2,966 if I don't. I'm going to take that $300 today. Over 25 years, you're probably costing yourself $100,000. Stupid. No other way to say it. Just stupid. But think about saying that to someone in those terms. So you have to make it palatable. hey, you should be saving. I can't afford to save. You can't afford not to save is what you need to be helping them understand. So anyone that gives me
political situation.
Yeah, I mean political situation.
Hold on, my bad. That what y'all actually caught was, you know what I'm saying, my brother, I'm still on the phone with him. Like I said, we talking money this time of morning, people.
Pull him in. What's his question? Let him ask the question directly.
Yeah, we got a live question, first time ever on the after show. My brother South, I call him South, y'all, you know what I'm saying, Dr. Lovin and DJ, because both of y'all in the financial industry, what he doing, like what we actually doing live right now is we playing with our 401ks. You know what I'm saying? A lot of y'all playing with other things, but we playing with our money this time of morning.
Man.
Yeah. Jim Beam, shout out to you. But Dr. Love and DJ, what the question is posed being is, we looking at the mix, and if you don't have a 401k, you don't know what we're talking about, but we'll educate you at this point in time. 401ks have a mix where you put in the domestic stock, foreign stock, bonds, short-term bonds, long-term bonds, and we're looking at the foreign stock, you know, the performance of the foreign stocks, and it hasn't been doing as good over the past year. And I attribute it to the current administration, and, you know, and we all know it, especially what's currently going on, but South, what was the actual question you wanted to ask? What do you know, just what was the general opinion on foreign stock?
I wanted to ask Dr. Lovin if he could shed any insight on a lot of the foreign stocks right now and where he thinks they might be going within the next 3 to 6 months based on the current political situation. Obviously, Trump ongoing with China, all of that. Where does he see it going within the next 3 to 6 months? Because I'm looking at making some changes based on what I've been seeing over the past year.
Okay, y'all heard that right. You know what I'm saying? Based on what he's been saying, he want to make some changes, and we're looking at foreign stock percentage and stuff. And DJ, you know what I'm saying? Definitely, both of y'all can, get at this question.
Before Doc jumps in there, you know, because he can be more specific, and on this one I have to be a little bit more general. What I would, I'm getting a little feedback here, but what I would tell him is, number one, if this is a short-term trade, then you may be playing in the wrong areas. If you're looking short-term for foreign or emerging market type exposure, and you need to delineate the two. So if you're looking for emerging market exposure, that's one thing. If you're just looking for foreign exposure, that's another. And you need to really look at it long term, because from a broad perspective, if you're looking at what the administration is doing, I think he's probably talking about the tariffs and what have you. Would you say that that's a more attractive buy position if those stocks in that sector were to go down? Because at some point, a trade agreement has to be worked out. So would you buy more while it's suppressed or quote unquote undervalued, or would you buy when it comes back into favor? So you have to remember, if you think about Benjamin Graham, the intelligent investor, you want to buy low, sell high. So what I would say is take the long-term approach. If you're looking for something more short-term, I wouldn't. Foreign equities may not be the place to play for a short-term trade. You may want to do more R&D and look locally at something like the cannabis business, so to speak. But I can't make any recommendations. I'm just saying what you may want to do. But anytime you're looking broadly, especially globally, you want to take a bit longer view, because policy certainly affects trade globally, and trade globally is going to affect the stock market as a whole. So, you know, that 3 to 6 month time period may not be the proper time horizon, but Dr. Lovin can go a little bit deeper on that than I.
Well, and that's precisely where I was going to go. All right, was just that 3 to 6 months is not usually the time period that I'm dealing with when I'm talking with people about their long-term financial goals. And when we're talking about stock ownership, these are long-term financial goal instruments, right? Your 401k is money that you will be using after age 59 and a half. Okay. And so you've got, 10 plus years. So having an appropriate amount of foreign investment, I think is a great thing. You know, the overall world portfolio out there includes foreign stocks too. Now, the cool thing about you already being involved and having some positions out there is that even if you don't change anything or you're just acquiring shares as you have been before, now you're buying shares in these foreign companies at a time where they may be getting beat up based on the public policy that's out there. Because let's face it, man, the market does not, we can say whatever we want to. You can have different attitudes about how this whole thing's going to end up. But the market in the short term does not like tariffs, right? Tariffs make things expensive or more expensive on every side for the consumers. And depending on how expensive these things get, right, and whether or not people start tightening up and saying they're going to spend less, that's how recessions happen, is when folks start tightening up and saying they're going to spend less. And that's what makes the market worry when they hear about the type of public policy that Trump is putting out there. So if you're asking what I think is going to happen in the near future, there's probably going to be some downward pressure on the prices of these stocks, these foreign stocks. And those are buying opportunities. But they're only really opportunities if they're consistent with your overall strategy, right? So, you know, you don't want you don't completely dissect any one decision from the overall decision of what it is that we're trying to accomplish. All of these things are all little tools that you're using to get you where you're going. So you don't want to get distracted by things that are going to happen. And distraction is easy in this current, especially political environment. There's a whole bunch of crazy stuff going on, right? But you want to be focused on what it is that you want to do. So if you're talking about things that are 10 plus years, yeah, a diversified portfolio of stock mutual funds or underlying stocks. Yeah, man, if you're not retiring for another 30 years, it's perfectly reasonable to be allocating some towards foreign exposures. It's, I think, a smart thing to do. The awesome thing is that as things go through the flux, the prices go up and the prices go down. When prices go down while you're in this position, what's happening? Well, you're acquiring more shares with that $50, $100, $200 a month that you have going into those funds. Now you're acquiring more shares of those funds, of either those funds or those underlying companies when they get beat up, right? So then as the price, as the worm turns, and it always does, and the economy improves, and we have a different administration, which we will one day, there will eventually be a turn in how things go, and that may lead to a turn in how the price of that stock goes. And so over time, those prices have tended to climb, and that's how you win. But the best way to focus on winning is focusing on what it is that you want. Don't get distracted by these small things, but understand, there's opportunities in there. Maybe I leverage a little bit more. Maybe, instead of putting 100, I put 150 a month over the next year or so into these foreign funds, because there's a lot of flux. You want to remember, buy low and sell high. So if there's opportunities where you think, man, things seem beat up over here. Not beat up because they're antiquated and it's going to be gone, but beat up just because, that's politically what's going on and the president doesn't like China. China's going to be back, right? China's not going anywhere. Still a world power, right? So, you got the issues.
Let's definitely let people know China has more people than we have here.
Right, man.
And when I say more, I mean way more. There are over 1 billion people in China. There are not 1 billion people in America.
Yeah, the key differentiator is this, though. If you look at a foreign country like China, their middle class is just now developing. So I want you to think about what we were told the American dream was and how long that was sold to us as Americans, and that was the hallmark of the economy and the stock market. You buy
Where's my 40 acres and a mule?
Well, I tell you what, you keep waiting on it, but we talked about that, man. Like, until we unite as a people and a culture and we demand something, that's not going to happen, and the way it needs to happen looks a lot different than what the conversation previously was. There needs to be some type of fund set up that you can apply to, but that's a whole different conversation. But for the purposes of for his question, if you think about what the middle class did for the U.S. economy for probably 50 years, just understand that while China has its issues in terms of reporting, and people will tell you that, and they're probably right, that they're bolstering numbers or they're not being very forthcoming. You can't deny that their middle class is growing, that their level of education is probably one of the highest or the standard in the world today. So when you look at the skill that their middle class is amassing, the way in which their country is set up from a governmental standpoint, I want you to think about that. Think about the benefits that the U.S. had for 40, 50 years. They're going to be receiving those benefits. So I would encourage him to think about things in terms of a full market cycle as opposed to the 3 to 6 months, specifically when you're talking about your 401k. Now, if we're talking about something that, you got an individual retirement account or just a brokerage account that you're able to make trades in, that's far different. When you're talking about money that you're not going to access for another 25, 30 years, you want to deal with full market cycles because it allows you to take full advantage of the peaks, the troughs, the valleys in the market. And like Dr. Loving said, you're going to be able to accumulate more shares at specific points in time where things are being beat up. Now, if something completely goes to hell, maybe you want to get out of it. But I'll give you a perfect example of buying opportunities. Think about years ago when BP and Shell were getting beat up with the oil spills or what have you. People who were student investors said, this is a perfect buying opportunity for me. I'm not getting out of this. This is BP and this is Shell. They will spend whatever amount of money they need to spend to right this wrong. Where are they today? 7, 10 years later, full market cycle. For those that are listening, full market cycle is considered 7 years. So 7-year market cycle, 7 to 10 years.
So real quick, and what I'm saying, definitely, this is something that, a lot, if you've been listening to the show, that this is something that's never been done before. We got a live question and we got live Q&A going on right now, and this may be something we implement, but I forgot to preface this question because the nature of what me and my brother are doing is, we trying to hit licks. And if you know anything about it, you know what I'm saying, you know what I'm talking about. We just trying to take advantage of a situation. We gambling people. Not real big gamblers. We ain't going to Vegas dropping $100,000 or $1,000 on the table and nothing like that. But small time gamblers. We go to the horse races. We go to we on FanDuel and things of that nature. And a lot of y'all are. And let's be real about it. We got a lot of colleagues and stuff that gamble on. Whether it's the lottery or anything like that, horse racing, betting, sports betting. And, you take a small amount, you can turn it into a large amount. And honestly, that's what stocks and bonds are for. It's small time, it's small time or big time gambling. If you got a couple of dollars, you can go buy some stock. And like we've said, buy low, sell high. But I wanted to throw that preface in because I forgot to, and see if that manipulates you all's response to it. Is what we're trying to do, and what he's trying to do is,
Nah.
We got some stocks going down. We got some foreign stocks going down in price. So we're trying to increase it.
No, listen. So
hold on. He said, go ahead, Sal.
No, go ahead. I'm listening. I want to hear what he got to say.
Good. All right, go ahead, DJ. He yielding.
Okay. Can you mute your mic? I'm good. Thank you. So it doesn't change what I have to say from an overarching perspective because, again, this goes back to two things. If we're talking about our 401ks, again, that goal, that strategy, that's a long-term investment. That's a long-term goal. making peripheral changes along the way are important if something is not going to, like Dr. Levin said, if this is going away. If this is something that's going to continue to be part of your strategy, now we're talking about percentages. We're not necessarily talking about direct dollars, because you got to remember your money's being split between all these various things that you're investing in if you're talking about a 401k. So maybe your foreign percentage goes up and you want to equate a dollar amount to that. But when you're talking about short-term trades, now you're getting into a space where you need a brokerage account set up. And if you're going to manage that brokerage account yourself and you're going to take on what we would call, and Dr. Levin, you know it better than me, the fiduciary responsibility of that account, you're assuming a significant amount of risk because you don't have the pool of investors backing you the way that you do in your 401k or your mutual fund, so to speak. Now, individual positions are different in this way. That risk is yours and yours alone. You're responsible for the stop loss. You're responsible for everything, the sell order. You effectively become a portfolio manager. And what I can tell you about people with limited time is that if the people with all the time in the world, if they're dedicating their time to getting this right and they miss, your ability to properly time the market is nearly impossible. So when Dr. Loving talks about a diversification strategy, that's your key to success. There will be obvious moments where you're like, hey, I definitely need to take advantage of this. And that's great. But overall, the time that it would take to day trade an account, to be up on the research that's appropriate, to know when to move, or what the volume is going to be, where the price targets are you going to listen to the earnings calls? There's so much more than looking at a chart and saying I should buy now, or just news. News will cause knee-jerk reactions, but it's going to be the fundamentals, or if a particular sector of the market is out of favor, that's going to drive your decision to buy or sell. So again, I would keep everything more long term. If it's not viable for a year or more in your 401k, I wouldn't do it. That's just me. But if it's something personal, like AJ is saying, like, hey, I want to gamble, I want to make some money. Now we're talking about my E-Trade account. Now we're talking about my Share Builder or my ING account, and I'm willing to take some risk. But let me say this before I wrap up. Understand that what your risk is also tied to the institutional investor who has the ability to move the market. So if you're investing $1,000 and you're making moves, keep in mind that there's an individual out there that has the same ideas around making money that you have, but when they take their $800,000 out, that significantly moves the market for you because they are X percentage of the overall investment. And now the market pullback looks a lot different. So when we talk about making moves, we have to keep in mind that they're relative to what larger investors are able to make. So safe place for you is 401k, make some safe decisions, what have you. You want to take some risk, they need to be extremely calculated. Suppressed stocks and bonds or what have you. And like Dr. Loving said, when it's low, you want to load up. But being strategic and understanding that 3 to 6 months, things can really move, especially if you're talking about bonds. Now, if you're talking about stocks and you're talking about foreign, 3 to 6 months is probably not the place for you to be because, again, policy needs time to play out, and you can't dictate what the news does when there's a 600 point drop in the market because 200 billion in tariffs were released. Is that the type of risk you want to try to manage? So those are all things that you need to think about when you're looking at those things. Now, again, that's my opinion.
Yeah. No, most definitely. And we all, Dr. Love, I don't mean to cut you off, but we definitely want to preface all of this with, we are not here to give specific financial advice. All of this is, for lack of a better word, it's opinion, and these are our, this is how we feel. But I will also preface this with the fact that Beloved are in the financial industry, as well as my brother that's on the phone, Randolph. They've all worked in the financial industry. And I forgot to also preface this with the fact that what my brother, the larger point that my brother was trying to, interject into our conversation, because I told him he's a part of this now, is the fact that, when it comes to 401ks, especially those of us who are working people, and we have access to our 401ks, because I know me personally, I can log into, they sent me an email, I can go into an app on my phone and I can manipulate my 401k. My brother has the same options. I'm pretty sure DJ and Dr. Loving also have the same option where we can log into some kind of account, just like we log into our bank account, and see our 401ks and we can manipulate it.
I didn't even upload it to my phone. I deleted it.
Right, you ain't got to, because you think a long term is just. But what my brother, the larger point was, it was more along the lines of financial education and literacy. Is look at these things and talk to someone about it. And exactly. I know both of you all are huge advocates of that, because I was telling my brother, and that was the point I was making with him, was when I first started working for my first corporation, I opened up a 401k just solely based on the fact that they told me it was like, here's this option. And I was like, sure, why not? Right. But I had never had the conversation of 401k with anyone previously in my family. Granted, my grandfathers had pensions, which, if you know the difference, they are not the same. Pension is
not at all.
Pension, you gonna get this, and you gonna get, and it's guaranteed. 401k is basically a stocks and bonds trust that you have made for yourself that can fluctuate with the market like everything else. But pension is there. So, the conversation about pensions was always had, but 401k was a very minimal conversation, and I think it's a minimal conversation with a lot of people, not just including the African-American community. But the point that we wanted to make was, if you have access to these things, if you are working a job now and you have a 401k or you have access to one, it's definitely a good thing to open one up and talk to someone about the way that these things work, because like we're doing now, we're moving our things around, and it's something that me and my brother, we do a lot, and I've had this conversation with other people, different, financial people and things of this nature. It's okay, and it's a thing that you can do where you can go in and manipulate your percentages, and, for lack of, I have a brokerage account. DJ talked about that, where you work with and I want to also let people know, Share Builder with Capital One does not exist anymore. I had a Capital One account. It is now with E-Trade. Right. So now you're with E-Trade. So that's what I have now. I have an E-Trade account. I also have an Ally Invest account where I buy individual stocks and bonds and ETFs, mutual funds and things of that nature, where it is what's the word I'm looking for? It's on its own. It's a brokerage account. It's not a 401k, but a 401k is in a sense, it's almost like a mutual fund where you have a mix of different things that you are investing in. You have, like we said,
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, so you got the domestic stocks, foreign stocks, short-term bonds, long-term bonds, but you have different percentages that you are in. So if you got 30% in foreign stocks, and then within that 30% is broken down into percentages of different individual stocks. So you may own, 5% of Baidu, and Baidu is a large international company. You may own 5% of the Facebook equivalent of Alibaba. Alibaba, you made the Chinese equivalent of Facebook, which I can't think of the name of it. It might be Baidu, but you own different percentages of that. But like DJ alluded to, is with a 401k, you can't necessarily manipulate the actual amount of stock you have. With a brokerage account, you go in and say, let me get 5, 10, 20, 30 shares of this. But with a 401k, you're owning a percentage, and you can't necessarily manipulate that. But what my brother was really alluding to was the education portion of it. And if you're talking to someone who works for your 401k company and you have a real conversation with them, they should let you know that you can indeed go into your 401k and you can make certain changes, which a lot of people don't know. A lot of people look at a 401k like an insurance policy. I pay my premium, and I just let y'all handle it. But you can go in, and if you talk to people and you talk to the right people, basically we just wanted to, push the conversation of financial literacy and financial education further, whereas you got to, and his point, his exact words were, you got the tools, use them. If you have the ability to go into your investment account, specifically your 401k, and see the various percentages that you have, and you can make small changes and things of this nature, like Dr. Lovin and Destrian alluded to, right now we're in a down period. Buy low, sell high. So if it may be, and we're not giving specific advice, but right now if you want to take a move, increase your contribution at the simplest. Increase your contribution so that, now you're acquiring more of something at a low time. That way now it's worth more when things work themselves out. But that was more of, the way that we were trying to push the conversation and push the narrative of the education portion, because people don't know these things. Like I said, me, myself, I had a 401k and I never touched it, because I just was under the assumption it was like an insurance policy. Put a little bit in, pre-tax. I get the tax, the deduction in the back end. Put a little bit in, and, later on in life, I'll get a little bit. And that was, that's basically it. I'll let y'all handle the rest. But, it's beneficial to talk to someone who is dealing with these things and know, like, hey, what if I change my mix up a little bit? And, for those of you who have 401k, you know what I'm talking about when I say your mix. Like we said, you got a certain percentage of certain sectors and industries and things of that nature. Let's mix it up. Because of current conditions and things of that nature, because we, like Dr. Lovin alluded to and DJ alluded to, the market moves every day. If you got stocks and you look at it every day, stop. That's my advice to you right now. Stop. If you got stocks and you're looking at it every day, stop doing that. It's stress. Because let me tell you something. Stocks has a lot to do with perception, and the media controls a lot of it, and we'll be honest about that. If they come out today and say something bad about a company, them stocks gonna drop. When United Airlines had the whole mix-up with the people and kicking people off planes, guess what their stock did? Dropped. But guess what they're doing right now? Back to what it was. But I just wanted to throw that in there, to keep the conversation going. Go ahead.
And I want to clarify one thing. So you referred to stock ownership as gambling, and I think I've heard this more than once, especially in the Black community. And I want to clarify what you're buying. Right? When you buy a stock, you're buying ownership in a company. Now, that's different than gambling, right? You buy lottery tickets, you got a chance at a win, and usually that chance is pretty doggone minuscule, one in a quarter billion or something like that, right? In terms of the big game and all that. And if you go to casinos, let's be real now. The reason that casino exists and can be so beautiful, and they bringing you endless cognacs. Do you know there's a button that you can push? And if you go through, you can order the button. I learned this the last time I was in Atlantic City. You go through the little field where you can order a drink right there at the little nickel slot machine. And I thought it was all just mixed drinks. What I found is that if you go further in there, you can buy straight cognac. Man, I bought a whole bunch of cognacs and was sitting up there playing nickel slots. Maybe spent 75 cents. I don't know. And I definitely drank a lot of cognac. And the reason that I say this is like when you go into a casino, when you're buying lottery tickets, those are entertainment things. Sometimes people win, don't get me wrong, but it really is a little pick me up, feel good, right? And it's fun. And, sometimes people win. I'm not saying don't play. Make sure that you play responsibly and recognize that that's different than an investment. When you purchase the stock of a company, you are purchasing the present value of future cash flows after expenses that are coming to that company, right? You are the owner of essentially the future of what that company is going to generate. And these companies are designed to make money, right? And so it's not like gambling where the house usually wins,
Always
and we can yeah, exactly. Well, we can indicate that by the fact that they're able to pay all these salaries, build new locations, offer you a shrimp and a shrimp, lobster, and steak buffet. All of those things come because people aren't winning. When we talk about people investing and holding stock over time, that's the way that wealth is held and grown and passed down. When we talk about generations, passed down to give your next generation those big opportunities, right? And so I want to make sure.
Let me ask you a question. Ask you a question there, because I think this is important as we talk about the path that you're going down. I mentioned to the gentleman earlier that, hey, are you going to listen to the earnings calls to see, are you going to look at the fundamentals? Are you going to look at the balance sheet, et cetera? Can you talk about why that's important? Because I think that's really what you're hitting on when we talk about the fact that it's not necessarily a gamble, because you have tangible information that you can tap into to allow you to make a decision. How would you make that decision? Because I think that's a part of the education that the brother is asking for. So that balance sheet, that earnings call, those types of endeavors to be able to say, here's where the company is going, and my return on investment is going to still be strong.
Yeah, so when I was talking about those cash flows that are likely to come in, that's precisely the information that you're getting, right? You're getting information about what the company owes and what it owns, right? What the debts that it has and the value of all the assets, the plant, the equipment, and all of the things that they've made in terms of inventory, all of the value of all of those things, right? That is part of the information that you're getting from the company. From usually within the company, they have people who are in investor relations, and it's their job to talk to the big institutional companies that hold stocks and own that stock, right? They want those people to be informed so that they can, they can act and purchase more of the stock. Usually the investor relations people are trying to paint things where you can see a positive future of the company. And that's how the company is trying to run itself. It's trying to position itself so that it can take on the most profitable opportunities in the future and make itself more valuable over time. And they want to reflect that to you in terms of these are the things that we think are going to make a positive impact, projects that we have and all of these things, so that you as an investor will say, hey, this looks like an opportunity. I feel like the cash flows are going to grow enough to compensate me for the risk that I'm taking. And what's the risk? Well, the risk is that, over time, the value of the stock is going to fluctuate. Other people aren't necessarily going to see the opportunities the same way you see them, or the people in the company see them, right? And everybody's value or perception of how much that stock is worth affects the bid and the ask prices that we see on a daily basis in the market, right? And so those things are going to affect how much it's worth in the short term. But I would encourage you to think again in a manner that centers it on these tools and what you want to accomplish, and how these companies, these particular companies, and some of them are foreign companies, fit into your overall portfolio strategy for what you're trying to do long term, because these are long term investments. And then like DJ said, hey, in the short term, you might want to go from 5% to 8%. International, because you see short-term opportunities. It's okay to make those kind of switches. And I want to see the fact that you're having this conversation, for me, like, this is comfortable.
Oh yeah,
this makes me feel good.
Oh yeah,
right? Because you're talking about different stock holding positions within a 401k instead of talking about just having one. Because there are people right now who are under the sound of my voice who have a 401k and probably have a whole bunch, if not all of it, allocated to cash, because the default
and they're not participating in the market at all.
At all, right?
At all.
So you're not even using the tool for the purpose it's created, because you're using it almost like a savings account. Now, the 401k, that IRS numbers its rules with numbers and then a letter, right? the 529 plan is the IRS rule, 401k, right? You know, this is an IRS rule that allows you to put money away and get a tax benefit, which says basically like you didn't make the money right now, so you're not charged taxes on it. And then it also allows that money to be invested in stocks, and you don't have to pay any taxes on it as that money grows. That's how a 401k works. The IRS rule says, hey, no taxes for you. Normal brokerage account every year, you're going to have some capital gains taxes for anything that you sold and made money on. IRS is going to get its money. Okay, so Rule 401k allows you to designate accounts in a certain way where you don't have to pay taxes on it while you're working and accumulating funds. And then at age 59 and a half, you can start drawing from it. At age 70 and a half, you have to start drawing from it, right? And then you pay taxes on it as though you're earning income then. Okay, so that's what a 401k.
Talk about the Roth? Can you talk about the Roth as well? I'm
just saying. I just wanted to just because we talked about the Roth. Yeah, the 401k. I don't want to get too far into the products. My point is that understand like the 401k is really just a tax treatment of this investment account for you, and so by virtue of it being just a tax treatment, there's not necessarily going to be any stock investment in it unless you make the election for that to happen. So I want you to make sure that you know what's in your account. So the worst thing, like worse than checking your account every single day is seeing the value.
Not checking it at all.
Yeah, not knowing what's in it, period, right? Or so how your allocations are being.
One second, AJ.
Go ahead.
AJ. Now, being that this brother is from the South, I'll use this specific example. He may be familiar with it, especially being a student in terms of the financial sector. If you can remember Enron, right? And you remember how they changed their accounting practices to report earnings in a certain way. None of those employees ever read the reports. None of those employees ever looked into the debt to income ratio of the corporation. They didn't look at the balance sheet or what have you, because they were basically, they used a marketing principle called mark to market to say that we'll mark our price based on what the market will allow us to price it at. We don't have to account for expenditures, etc. And we're just booking, like Dr. Loving said earlier, future revenues. This is why it's important, and why I brought it up earlier, to say, hey, are you taking a look at what you own? Are you looking at the financial analysis? Are you looking at their, annual report or what have you? Because all too often we make investments based on the news. You need to make investments based on the facts as well as how the news reports those facts. So that's a key thing, right? So you want to combine the two. And if anyone was looking at Enron closely, they would have saw they were cash strapped and that, they were top heavy and they were basically using the employees to funnel themselves. So in order to avoid a situation like that, certain types of reporting has been made mandatory, and you should educate yourself around that, Sarbanes-Oxley and things of that nature. But like Dr. Loving said, the mere fact that you're having this conversation, I want you to think about how many people are just putting all of their money somewhere and not even talking about this or asking a proper question. So when you think about generational wealth and how it's built, we said it was one of the key cornerstones was communication. You're asking the right questions. Now it's about aligning what your desires are with the proper tools to accomplish it. And I think that, obviously Arthur does a lot, and Dr. Loving does a lot. I'm restricted in what I can do in a lot of ways based on my occupation. But as it relates to my 401k, what you guys are talking about is not foreign at all. I take a look at what's happening and I go, okay, I definitely need to increase my foreign exposure, or I need to bring my foreign exposure down. Those are called tactical shifts. but those are not meant to be long term. Your strategic weights or shifts where you're allocated at are meant to be the most impactful to your portfolio. Those are just things that you change around the edges. And so what Dr. Loving said is true. The fact that you're taking a look is good. How often you take a look can be debated or what have you, but oftentimes the more change you make, the less effective or the less alpha or addition you're adding to that portfolio, because you have to allow things time to play out. And I'd preach patience to you and the rest of the listeners, because if you look at a standard market cycle, it tends to yield better returns than what the person that's trying to do a lot of timing and shifting does. You look over the history of the stock market, I think is returned over 10% or close to it. That's just if you're fully invested, which leads to the point that Dr. Loving was making about folks that's using it as a cash instrument. If you're not going to be invested in it, you're almost throwing money away. Almost. It's better than a CD, but not much.
And real quick, I just wanted to interject. That was another point, the continuation of me and my brother's conversation on this, this behind the scenes, and he was saying, if you're 25 and you're making six figures and you got a 401k, it will behoove you, and these are his exact words, it will behoove you to go in and educate yourself on how that process works and play around with it because you can afford to, in a sense, versus being that same 25-year-old putting into a 401k, letting it be stagnant and letting them decide for you, and then taking $500 to $1,000 post-pay. And, if you're working, you know what post-pay means. Right. Taking that, taking what your expendable income, putting it into a stock account, buying individual stocks, and then sitting there watching them, and you lose out. Versus, like we said, the alternative is you got this pre-tax money, which is coming off as a deduction when it comes tax time, and you putting, hundreds, if not thousands, into it based on your contribution. You're young, and you're making a decent amount of money. You have expendable income. Don't take your expendable income and do what your 401k has the possibility and the privileges of doing. But that is part of the vast, massive, and elaborate conversation that is financial literacy and education, which, like we, as we've come to the, as this conversation, like DJ said, has fleshed itself out, we know that this deep of a talk didn't come, in our upbringing, not to down shame or downtrod our upbringing. We've had the conversations about saving, and it was very basic. But the real conversations now, especially as technology and, society advances, is, and DJ has heard me say this, and Dr. Lovin, and this will be the first time you heard me say this, my brother on the line, he's heard me say this, is we preach this ownership within the African American community. Some of us are blessed to have, grandparents or great grandparents that own land and own property, parents that own land and own property, and we know at some point it'll come there. What are you gonna do with it?
Right.
Because in the basic scheme of accounting, land, yeah, it's an asset, but is it really? Let's really look at it. You paying property tax on it unless you got some kind of exemption. So now it's a liability. You got to pay on it. And if it's a house, you got to pay insurance. So now guess what? You got a liability. Are you letting it make money for you? Unless you got the home house and you living in the home house, that's your home, that's your place of residence. Sure. Now you paying, you're doing the regular thing. You're paying your insurance on it, you're paying the property tax on it. That's fine. But let's say you got your own stuff. You're paying a part, you're paying rent somewhere, or you're paying a mortgage on your own house, and your grandparents have left you land. And now you got to pay property tax on that land because Meemaw, Grandma, Pawpaw had the exemption. In some states, if you over a certain age, you're paying exemption. Exactly. They paying a discounted or an exempted rate, but it doesn't transition to you. So now you in your 20s, 30s, 40s, now you got to pay the regular price of property tax. So what are you going to do with this because you don't live there? You don't live there, so what are you gonna do with it? So
well,
now we got to. Go ahead, DJ. Go ahead, because you already know what my point is. My point, I'm gonna say my point, and I'm gonna throw it to you.
Go ahead.
Is we got, for those of us who have had, semi conversations around this issue and generational wealth and things of that nature. You got the land. How is it working for you now? Because otherwise, it's a liability. Make it work for you. Go ahead, DJ, because you already.
It's not even that I know what you're going to say. It's just like at the crux of it, it's about income generating activities, right? And if you're not generating income, you're sitting on it. So you're wasting time and you're wasting money. So as it relates to land specifically, and you and I have definitely had conversations around this. We've both been in this situation. What are we going to do to monetize it where it's not a liability, but it becomes a true asset and it pays us? So again, these are earning type.
I don't mean to interrupt, but I got to, because let's be honest, because I've seen this situation time and time again to where we inherit things that people have worked literally years, because we are not too far. I know for a fact, me and DJ myself, we are direct descendants of the South, and Dr. Lovin, I'm pretty sure, can trace his back to the South, to where, we know, our great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents were probably sharecroppers, which means they worked their ass off to get a little bit of something, and that little bit of land is what the home house is on, and that our parents and our grandparents grew up on. And at this point in life, we so far removed from that, we've let it go, or we sold it off for nothing. And it was
or it was taken from you,
or taken because we didn't,
based on the value of the land.
Exactly. Go ahead, keep going. I just wanted to throw that in there.
I think that's important, because if someone is willing to take something for you based on its value, it shows you what I would call the intrinsic value of the land or the property. It's similar to what Dr. Loving said is, okay, what are future values discounted back to present day? And that's why land was taken from people, because the future value of that land was so vast and so rich that people knew that, hey, owning land is going to be the way to generate wealth in the future. So the whole promise or idea of 40 acres and a mule was generated on that pretense alone. Now, if you look at where we are today, just owning land doesn't mean anything. See, before people harvest the land, they cropped it, they went out and they worked that land, they tilled that land. That's not a skill that most folks have today. And ironically, people that look like us on this call don't have that skill today either. The vast majority of sharecroppers or farmers in this country today don't look like us. That skill was passed down and given to generations of families that owned slaves, because it was extremely lucrative. Now, as you move on and build upon that narrative, going back into what the brother Randolph was talking about, how do you invest, and how do you properly allocate based on the information you have? All of it comes down to the same basic principle, and it may sound simple, but it's hard to do because of impatience and a lack of discipline. Dr. Loving said it earlier. You need to develop a broad strategy for what you want to accomplish. Now, that by itself, left to your own devices, is hard, because if you haven't had those conversations in your household, how the hell do you even know how to set a strategy or what to come up with? And if you don't make enough money to afford a financial advisor, where do you find this information at? Well, let me close the gap. There's no excuse, because you can find anything you want to find on the internet if you do enough research. There are other tools out there like robo-advisors that will guide you. You don't necessarily have to sign up for them, but they'll give you questionnaires and information that may help you. But if you work for a company the questions that Randolph was posing, you should be asking those questions of your 401k administrator, because they're responsible for answering them. Hey, if I'm going to invest in a foreign stock, what's my current exposure or my risk? Can you help me understand the underlying investment? Or can you put me in touch with the fund company, a sales rep from the fund company that can explain my underlying exposure? It's all out there for us. We don't ask questions. And I'm very proud and I'm very happy that this brother is asking questions, because ultimately it enables him to make more impactful and better decisions. So as opposed to say, let me put 30% of my allocation in foreign, or I'm going to reduce it from 30 to 5, whatever information he may have ascertained tonight or whatever research he may do, he's going to make a better decision. And at the end of the day, the goal of this podcast, the goal of sharing information, is to help the listeners, our friends, our family, make better decisions, more informed decisions. AJ talked about it earlier, owning land. Are you earning anything from it? You need to make a better decision. What are you doing with that land? You can contact T-Mobile, and I know you know this, AJ. Hey, T-Mobile, you want to put a cell phone tower on my land? I'm not using it. And by the way, you guys are now responsible for cutting this grass that I've been paying this guy $1,000 a month to do. So there's so many ways to generate passive income with the things that we've inherited, if we have an inheritance. But then there are also so many ways to create an inheritance for the next generation, and we're not thinking about those things. We need to get back to some very serious basics. And I talked about this in the last episode. I'm going to talk about it again.
I hate to interrupt, but it's
not a problem at all.
You know, honestly, and you know, for historical reference, we got to get back into the mindset of the sharecropper, in a sense, because you know, in those times, and if your family ain't from that, look at it. You know, when it was the time of the sharecroppers, they were invested in simply trying to make something for. They were trying to create generational wealth. Yeah. That was their whole goal. Like the premise of sharecropping was like, look, you work this land, you'll own it, and they knew that ownership was the gateway to create generational wealth, and that was the first step. And honestly, we're the beneficiaries of that era. In a sense, you know, our generation is the beneficiary of the era of people who were, our grandparents, our great-grandparents were the beginning of the generational wealth conversation, because they were the first ones. Really look at history and look at the timeline and see how far removed we are from certain situations. And understand, truly understand, and I know for a fact, you know, Dr. Loving, myself, and DJ, we are, you know, Dr. Loving was raised in Chicago, but I know for a fact that his relatives had to have come from the South. DJ and I grew up down South. Dr. Loving, the only difference is Dr. Loving's ancestors were part of the Great Migration, I'm pretty sure. You know, where they were able to create that first move to like, look, we got to get out of here and go somewhere else where opportunity is prospering right now. Our people, me and DJ's people stayed around possibly because they already had a nest egg or had something going for themselves, owned something. So it was, you know, it behooved them to stay. But the point being made is we are truly the beneficiaries of those people who had the beginnings of the conversation, and it is our responsibility to continue the conversation and build on that conversation. Because like we said, we were taught the importance of ownership, but were we also taught the importance of let this land work for you? Because unless you're going to live on it and you paying a bill because you live here, what is it doing? Because I live in New York and I own property in Alabama. What is that property doing for me other than being a bill? I got to make it work for me. Let me rent it out for land. Let me rent it out for hunting leases. You know, these are the conversations that need to be had amongst ourselves and our families, our communities, everywhere. It needs to be had in general. It doesn't have to be a racial conversation where only black people are talking about this, because there are white people in our same situation who are struggling, and we have more in common with each other than we do apart. The conversation needs to be had. Look, your people own some land too, right next door to my people, and both of us paying property tax on this land, and we ain't making a dime from it. Maybe we need to collaborate and rent our land out to somebody who wants to be a farmer, who doesn't have the land. Maybe we want to rent this land out to somebody who wants to hunt, but doesn't live here and lives up north and wants to come down south and hunt. Because let me tell you something about Alabama and Georgia, baby. We got some of the best hunting land in America, damn near in the world. And people are paying thousands to lease and rent land, open land, to hunt deer, quail, turkey, hog. I'm country talking right now, but I'm being real.
But it's important, though, like, because at the end of the day, like when you talk about the value of land, the value is just like we talked about the seed earlier, is what the land produces, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're growing something on that land and you're selling that crop that you grow, boom, that's what it's worth, right? If it's land that's adjacent to communities that are growing and you have businesses that are going to want to acquire that land so they can sell goods and services to those growing communities, boom, that gives the land value, right? Now, the taxes obviously go up as the value goes up. The more that people want to pay for it, for the expensive crops that you can cultivate there, or the opportunities in terms of what the companies could do if they had that land and the ability to sell there, that is, that's where the action is in terms of the price appreciation on land. But my dad always says this, and this is important too, right? If you own land, you own it jointly with family members, you got a whole bunch of action. Y'all having family meetings and calls to decide who's going to pay what, and all the rest of these things. You got rifts because one person didn't pay their part or didn't pay it on time, or people are arguing with one another about the property taxes and all the rest of this. Do not confuse action with productivity, or activity with productivity, right? So many times you get caught up in the repeat that. Do not confuse activity with productivity, right? So many times we get bogged down in all of these details and all of the this, such, and that you got to do. But you've missed the entire forest for the trees, just like AJ was talking about. You're not leasing it out for hunting. You're not growing anything on it. All you're doing is paying bills, and basically you're holding it in the hopes that eventually somebody else who is more industrious than you will want that land because it has the ability to be used for one of those things.
Dr. Love, listen, let me tell you something, man. Look.
Somebody right there.
Look, listen. We are all on such a wavelength. DJ, did I not say those exact words to you the other day? Literally, I've said the same exact words to DJ a couple of times over the past month or two, to where we, like I said, we are the beneficiaries of that generation, to where, like, some of us own something. We own some land or something somewhere, and then, like you said, we got that land and we holding on to it in hopes that somebody's just gonna come pay us an amount that's, worth what we think it's worth. Grandpa paid $50,000 for this land, and somebody gonna come along and pay us $100,000 for it. We held on to it for 5 or 10 years, but guess what they gonna do? They gonna come and buy that land for $100,000, which is $50,000 more than what Paul paid for it, and they're gonna turn it into a commercial area. They're gonna get it zoned for commercial, and now they're making $100,000 a month on the property that you sold for $100,000 one time. And it's the same exact thing I talked to DJ about. We've been having this conversation. It's like we own the land. We're not making it work for us because we're holding it in the hopes that somebody's going to pay us what we think is worth. And now guess what they're going to do? Because if they come in to pay us that, if they come in to pay us that, they already got a plan in mind. Ain't nobody just going to buy, nobody's going out to buy land to go hold it. Let me tell you this right now. Ain't nobody going to buy land to hold it no more. Unless you got a hot tip. Like if you was living in not Mount Meigs. If you were living in Hopewell, Alabama, and you had some farmland, back in the day, if you lived in West Point, Georgia, before Hyundai and Kia came, and you knew that there was possibly a possibility, just like Amazon talking about building another headquarters, and you buying property up in Long Island City, New York, thinking that they're gonna come and buy it out. Yeah, go ahead, buy you some land. That's gambling. Buy you some stock and some land. Hope for it to come. But other than that, if you holding it waiting for somebody to come along, guess what they're gonna do? They coming to buy it, and they're gonna make way more than you ever thought you could have made. They taking it
from you. At the end of the day, like what you're really saying, not even really saying, you said it. Like they're taking it from you, and they're gonna do what you should have done with it, or what you didn't think to do with it. Because if we're really being real here, this is politics at its finest. So the way that I define politics is the art of making a decision, but you make it when it no longer matters, but it benefits you the most. So even if you think about the freeing of the slaves, like that's politics. It's the art of making a decision, but you delay it and you make it when it benefits you the most.
You're giving a little bit too much education right now. You're giving a little bit too much education right now. You're gonna have to take all of this.
You're
gonna get this work.
You're gonna have to get it, because the economic improvement for the country was substantial, because now you have all these people, quote unquote, being taxed in the workforce, buying things, so on and so forth. But when you talk about it being political, if you delay it long enough where it's more beneficial to you, now when banks, and I think Dr. Loving has talked about this previously, the rates that banks were charging African American people to own the same land they say they were going to get was astronomical, or businesses. So with no credit, no income, this is why credit was established, because you had none. You had no relationship, you had no credit. So from a political standpoint, I can now put laws in place that I can take from you what I've given to you legally. And so that land was so vital and so important that it became a political ploy. I can take your land from you. I can take your business from you. But if we think about the very best of who we were, and you go back to Oklahoma, like Dr. Loving said, and you think about a Black Wall Street, everything was purposeful. And it was done in a very decent and orderly way. Political folks want to make money too. And remember that. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, you could make money. The problem was the money was staying in the community too long. You don't have that problem today. We give it right back. Right back. So if you were to
3 to 5 minutes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's less than 7 minutes is the number. So if you have an idea and you have the land, you need to look back from whence you came in terms of our historical references. And like you said, look at what some of the folks have done in generations prior. And we need to advance those efforts and reconstruct and reconfigure that in broader society, and go into those strategic partnerships and make sure that we have the emotional intelligence, and that we're being intentional about our brand, and that we're doing all the things necessary to make sure that we are approaching opportunity and overcoming obstacles, etc. And we continue to walk our way through these conversations. We're breaking generational cycles, and we are building generational wealth. So if you just think about what you're saying we need to do in general, it's building upon the very first podcast all the way through this one. Those are the action steps. Those are the action steps that need to be taken in the community at large, in society at large, because hear me clear when I say this. If the African American community does better, the American economy does better. If we make better decisions with our capital, the American economy does better. And we benefit as a community, the economy benefits as a whole. But it starts here now with us. And that's the real crux of it. So the questions that Randolph is asking, the questions that you're posing, the responses that Dr. Loving is giving, all boils down to what steps are you going to take to make these things happen? And I would say, if you don't do anything else, go back and look at the topics for each podcast. We didn't build this podcast to basically yield the return that is yielding tonight. But every episode has been a building point to answer the questions that's been asked tonight. So what do? How do we get there? How do we build generational wealth? Strategic partnerships. Build your power circle. You need to have some emotional intelligence. You need to build your brand. You need to be intentional. You know, you need to be able to overcome opposition and meet challenges. You need to be able to break generational cycles. And you need to begin the process of building generational wealth. And I can't script it any better than that. But those are the action items that need to happen. And that's point blank and period.
Wow. I right now my mind is blown because, even, being a part of this and, literally hearing you put it into words, DJ, is, like you said, we didn't build this. It's not like we said we're gonna do this. We're gonna create episodes with this topic, and lead up to this topic. All of this is purely organic. And the conversation that we have had and are having tonight is ultimately the penultimate of, what needs to be said and done in our communities and in a lot of communities, we'll say, because everybody ain't raised the same. But I also want to point out the fact is this doesn't mean this is the end. This is really like, hey, y'all have read the foreword to what we really got to say, and now is when we really have the ability to talk now, because we've given a lot of foundation to the ultimate goal of all of us, which is to, like Dr. Lovin and DJ and myself always allude to, is better in our community, people over things, putting ourselves, our friends, our family into better financial situations, better situations overall. And, from episode 1 until now has really, like DJ said, been a groundwork and, a foundation laying of basic, minimal steps and actions to take to get you to a starting point. Because like we said in the last episode of Breaking Generational Cycles, it can start or it can end with you. Like, your family could have been wealthy up until you, and then you be the one that messed it up. Or your family could have been poor up until you, and you be the one that changes that. But the hour grows weary, so Dr. Lovin, I'm gonna throw it to you to, close it out on your end, and then DJ, I'll throw it back to you, and then we'll close it out. But I just, I'll hold it. Go ahead, Dr. Lovin.
Yeah, and I'll be brief here. I just, it's funny how this whole thing evolved, right? It's pretty cool that we go from talking about what it is that you do to be successful professionally, and then how you take, all of the resources that you've put together and amassed and worked with folks to be purposeful about what your future is going to look like, and the future of your family and the future of the people that you care about is going to look like. So that we can talk forever. When I talk about having a show in the future where we talk about all of the things that you do, I don't worry about running out of ideas and things to talk about in terms of how finance affects families and people, right? We got so many stories out there, right? But in terms of what it is that you need to do to make this work for you, that's the most important part, right? Taking these ideas, listening to them, and starting to craft a strategy for yourself, and then a strategy and having real big audacious goals that make sense and that you can quantify, and you start to put things together, and then you start to plant those seeds, and you do like that farmer, and you act as though the things that you have prayed for and worked for are going to happen, and you continue to cultivate, and then you measure and you harvest and you continue to thrive, right? And that's what life is about, is, planting and harvesting on its face in terms of living with the opportunities around us and what's plenty, right? And so we have to be aware of the things that are there. And I think that I like this. This is almost like a tie for the first season. All these TV shows are having their crescendo moments, and maybe this is our first little crescendo, and then we got a lot more for you, right? But the fact is, when it comes down to it, if you can start thinking purposefully in this way and acting purposefully in accordance with some of these things, man, we'll fill in some of the details of how to get there as we go forward. But the biggest thing, the most important thing, the thing my pops, I know I say this all the time, my pops always says this to me: the biggest part is making the decision. It's saying, this is what I'm going to do going forward. Boom. Once you've made the decision, not a wish, not a hope, not a decision, now you start putting your efforts, your resources, your plans all in place in order to make those things happen. So I encourage you all today to listen to what we've talked about and then make a decision and act on it. That's all I've got.
Beautifully and well put as usual. DJ, I'll throw to you.
I recently had the privilege and benefit of listening to a keynote from a gentleman by the name of Jesse Itzler. If you don't know who Jesse Itzler is, I suggest you Google him, follow him on Instagram, and also his wife, Sarah Bankley, who's the inventor of Spanx. When I listened to Jesse, he talked about a couple of things that resonated with me, but one of the most profound things was how he viewed time. The way that he views time is unique, but it's the application that's the most beneficial. So if you think about your time and you think about, you relate that time to generations, he says that one of the biggest mistakes we make is that we base our decisions and our time on calendar years. So we look out and we say, we'll reevaluate this next year, we'll do this next year, or we'll review this annually. He said that what he does for we talked about it, big audacious goals, he gives himself 90 days. And he runs after it with everything he has. And while he may not complete the goal in 90 days, he's put himself in a position to absolutely complete it within that year. But he moves on. You can work on it ancillarily while you move on to something else. He has another focus, so to speak, for 90 days. But he can work on those other things on the peripheral. By doing so, he challenges himself to do something big every 90 days, which means that he gets 4 times more things done in a year than most people. Now, what's unique about Jesse is that he said in his speech that talked about generational wealth, he said he slept on 18 couches, but he went from sleeping on those couches to selling a business to Warren Buffett for $5 billion with a B in less than 18 months. Because he stayed true to some principles. Okay? We can flesh those principles out at a later date. But just think about what he did with his time. He committed big audacious goals every 90 days. As hard as I can. And I think that we need to do the same for ourselves and our families as it relates to generational wealth, because we don't know if it's going to be us or the relative that's laying on the couch with that dream deferred that's going to be the one to break through and create that generational opportunity for our families. While we all have the opportunity to do it, some of us are in a better position to do it than others. It's up to us, all of us, like Dr. Loving said, under the sound and guide of my voice. Have the conversation. You don't know what fire you might ignite in someone to be a catalyst for change generationally for your family. And secondarily, you don't know what the benefit of that conversation might be to you personally to be able to go out and affect change. And then again, finally, I just like to remind our listeners and encourage them to take action. If you have a aging loved one, which most of us do at this age, they won't be with us forever. And also consider yourself. Tragedies happen. Insure yourself, insure your loved ones. It's as much as 2 fast food meals a week. It's worth the sacrifice. And I would hope that our listeners see it as such. And again, if there's something that you're going through and we can be additive to you, please reach out to us through our various mediums, whether that be Instagram, Facebook, or our personal websites. It is a gift to have you listen, and it's also a gift to be able to talk about things that we do amongst ourselves and share them with you and have the feedback that you give us. So I want to thank everyone that listens. I know that we're all appreciative, but from me to you, thank you.
As always, I'll begin by saying I am wholeheartedly appreciative of both of you all for sharing your knowledge with myself and our listeners, and I'm pretty sure I speak on behalf of our listeners in saying that I appreciate both of you all for, doing what you do. I'll be like a Southern Baptist preacher, and I'll give you 3 points. Habits, intention, and life insurance. It takes 18 to 254 days to create a habit. Let's start creating one. One of those habits being communication. Like we've stated, and it's been a theme during this after show in most parts, is we are the direct beneficiaries of the generation who were the workers and the doers. They understood that ownership was a necessity, so they owned. It is our responsibility to take that ownership and make it work for us now to create generational wealth. Otherwise, we pass along what we see as an asset, which is truly a liability because we're in a bill on it. Now we pass that debt on to the next. Yeah, we pass and land on. We own something, but let's continue that conversation. Intention versus education, or intention and education. We know a lot of us were raised in households where savings were taught. Being model citizens were taught. Having and owning assets were taught. But practical steps in education and the next step was not given. We watched our grandparents work hard and own. We watched our parents do the same. But the actual education portion of how to do it was not taught. We had the example, but not the education. I like that. I got to write that down. Having the example and not the education. Let's change that narrative. And life insurance, challenge. If you ain't got none, go get it. That's as simple as I can put it. If you do not have any life insurance on yourself, go get it. I know for a fact, my job gives me $25,000 and I don't pay for it. My job pays for it. But I can't trust them. I can't rely on them. I got to go get my own. $25,000 ain't going to do nothing. We already told you at the top of the show, $7,000 to $9,000 is the average cost of a funeral. And we already know. Let's be honest. We know how we like to roll when it comes to death. So you're going to need way more than that. So if you don't have no life insurance, go get it. Challenge. Stop eating at McDonald's, Burger King, Applebee's, Chipotle, Panera Bread. Sacrifice a little bit for a lot. Because if somebody walked up to you and was dead serious and said, if you gave up $5 a week, and I promise you, when you die, I'll give your family $250,000. Wouldn't you take it? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we thank each and every one of you for listening. And as always, you can find us on our various social media and web domains. And to find that and much more, you can visit Dr. Ajamu Loving, PhD at ajamuloving.com. Destrian Wells at dwellsconsulting.com. I got it right. And you can visit myself, AJ Woodson, at mmbbgw.com. We thank you. We appreciate you. We cherish you. You are our assets. And you pay off. Because if you're doing good, we doing good. Like we said, this is the BREADren podcast, baby. Bread, B-R-E-A-D, because we always talking about bread and we always getting bread. And we appreciate you. We love you. And good night.